Hi, I'm Sarah from The Upcoming. A pleasure to be with you here in London for the film festival.
Hi, Sarah. How
Hi.
you doing?
I'm very well, thanks.
Good.
Maybe you could begin with a brief introduction to this amazing film, Girl. For people who don't know anything about it, what can they expect?
So my name is Adura Onashile and I'm the writer-director of Girl. It's my first feature. And Girl is, for me, ultimately a love story between single mother Grace and her only child, Amma. And when Amma hits puberty, Grace is confronted with having to face the trauma of Amma's sort of coming into the world through an assault, and that she's never dealt with. And as the film progresses, it's the story of how Grace learns to deal with that and what that means for their relationship. But it's ultimately a meditation on their love and resilience.
And maybe you can talk a bit about the genesis of the project and the
Yeah.
story itself, which I believe has, very personal roots for you.
Yeah.
So where did it all come from?
Well, lots of things, really, to be honest, lots of facets of my relationship with my mum. I was brought up in a single parent household. I'm an only child. And often the lines were blurred between whether we were mother or daughter or best friends or sisters. And I think that's kind of what happens when there's just two of you and it's a really intimate relationship. And I came back to London. I was born in London but grew up in Glasgow. And we came back to London when I was 11. It was a real culture shock. And where we ended up was in a part of Bermondsey that was quite unfriendly to black folk. We ended up feeling quite isolated in our flat for a period of time. And it's that time that I really wanted to capture because our relationship we became even closer in a way as a result of like the environment we lived in. And I've always been fascinated by the kind of connection between something that feels traumatic and that should be problematic, but actually creates a lot of love, So, and that juxtaposition felt like something I really wanted to explore. So in Girl, I've taken it to the extreme in terms of Grace's backstory and trauma. But in essence, that love story comes from, I think, a desire to want to tell the story, that part of the story of my upbringing in a way that I've never seen in cinema before, really.
And what for me feels incredibly unique about the film is the look and feel of it. So much is sort of conveyed by the images that you capture, the music that you use. You sort of feel like you're actually sort of cocooned somehow in that relationship, particularly, with the daughter. Maybe you could just talk a little bit about how, you achieved that or what your reference points might have been in terms of the cinematography and the music.
Okay, so I have I surrounded myself with some pretty phenomenal artists. So I've got Tash Back, who's our cinematographer. I've got Ray Olunaga as my composer. I've got Soraya Jailani, who's the production designer. I've got Kirsty Halliday as costume designer. So you want to surround yourself by people who elevate what you want to do. And there was always a lot of poetry in my script. I think sometimes when you feel isolated in the way that you grow up, you can feel like you're always on the outside looking in. And it felt really important to me that the audience is allowed to just gaze properly at these characters without judgment in a way, and kind of almost forcing my audience to really look and figure out what they're seeing and what they're feeling. And there's a lot of space for the audience to infer what's going on. And I think that's because, and that felt really important to me. There's a kind of intimacy. I'm kind of forcing the audience kind of fly on the wall, just sit with these characters. Lots of close-ups of faces, lots of bird's eye view of the characters. It's almost like I wanted to create a sense of them being defined by them not being defined only by the environment. So that intimacy and that poetry felt really important to me and was there in the script. There's not a lot of dialogue in this film, and there wasn't a lot of dialogue in the script. And so that meant, how else do I tell the story? How do the silences feel charged? How do we still feel like we get information about the characters when essentially they're not telling us and not a lot is happening? That felt really, So the people I gathered around me really helped to tell that story.
And with your phenomenal cast right at the centre,
Oh,
Deborah
my
and
goodness.
Lashanti.
Yeah.
I mean, I think also it's the fact that because so much of it is sort of playing out wordlessly, we had to really sort of feel in our bones the strength of that relationship.
Yeah.
And it's quite amazingly achieved. So, I wondered if your background in theatre, was there lots of rehearsal? Did that kind of change the way perhaps you approached that to get that conveyed on
Yeah,
screen?
I think it's funny, isn't it? I think it's that, I mean, I wouldn't ever call this like a visual essay or going down experimental film where I would never say that. It's not that, but I think the space and the breadth around it is not something that film affords us a lot of lately. I think there's a presumption that we need things to move quite quickly, and we're used to watching things move quite quickly, and Girl is asking you to take a step back and kind of sit back and let this relationship wash over you. And what's central to that is Deborah Lukumwena playing Grace and Lashanti Bonsu playing Amma. And to be honest, they were a gift. Like, pretty much from the first tape I saw of both of them, I was like, I think these are our characters. And then I insisted on 3 weeks rehearsal before the shoot started so that they were really comfortable with each other. And that comes from a theatre background, because I know in the rehearsal process, you get a complicity with each other that sometimes you're not afforded to in film because you just jump straight into shooting. So we had 3 weeks of rehearsal.
And Leanna Turner as well. I mean, kind of like, such a spark, and
Yeah.
she's like so
Well,
already in that
she's the
background.
real instigator of change in this film, right? She's the one that comes into their relationship and demands something else of Amma, and that demands something else of Grace. And so it was important that we had this character that had a sort of, she's kind of mercurial at the beginning. You're not quite sure which way she's going to go, but ultimately she has a lot of care for Amma and a lot of insight for the change that needs to take place. And Leanna Turner is just a brilliant actor. She was maybe came from a more theatrical background. She'd already done quite a few plays. Ashanti was very much new to acting.
And also I wondered, this kind of sort of visually poetic approach, it seems to find beauty in sort of mundane spaces, even just the lights of the city or the colours that come out. And it was making me think of a completely different film, but in Scrapper, there's kind of an effort, we aren't, rather than kind of looking at sort of deprived communities or areas of the city in this very bleak way, we're sort of finding the beauty in there too.
Yeah, I mean, I think, British cinema, let's move away from showing working class communities and characters in only a specific way. I just don't think that's the reality of my life, and that's not the reality of the lives of people I know. And I think cinema needs to catch up. In all spheres of society, beauty and trauma and light and darkness mix. And I think that there's space for that in the cinema as well. And I love that you've mentioned Scrapper, because I find Charlotte Regan really inspiring as a filmmaker, as a person. And I think, just pushing the boundaries of how we tell the stories of different communities and different characters is really important.
And in terms of the takeaways from the film, there's a lot to unpack there, because it's kind of this mother-daughter relationship. She's trying to protect her daughter, but in what ways might she be, confining her? So, there's a complexity there, but it's not a black or white thing of, being a good mother, being a bad mother at all. So, what do you hope people will take away from watching it?
I find this question like one of the hardest questions. I feel like, please don't ask me this question. I don't know what people should take away from it. I think why I'm reticent about answering the question is that I feel like my job is to leave as much space for the audience to come in with as much as they want to. And but what I do feel I want people to come away with is the idea that I've treated all these characters and this story with care. That's like super important to me, that there isn't a sense that I'm sitting on the fence, and there isn't a sense that I'm judging these characters. And I leave space. It's really important to me to leave the space for the audience to come into the story as well. That feels really important. But outside of that, I don't really know. I think people come with their own film bias, with their own story bias, with the sorts of things they like, and I can't really prescribe, and I can't really change that. All I can ever do is, as a filmmaker, I think, is leave enough space so that you're not spoon-fed everything, and you can come to find an empathy with the characters and with the story.
And of course, something that's so overly politicized, the game playing that we're seeing, running up to the election, immigration is just, being blared at us from every corner. And obviously there is an element of that in the story. And, you know, what is the place of how are we treating people in our communities? You know, I guess you don't want it to be kind of a lightning rod issue in your film, but there is that context that is playing out,
Absolutely.
you know, to help us humanize perhaps what could be behind all that.
Yeah. And, you know, yeah, we have come to a place where somehow we don't think it's a human right to feel safe anymore. I don't know when that happened. Somehow we're like, no, you're allowed to feel safe. You're not allowed to feel safe. You know, and I don't know when we landed on this binary and this judgment. And yeah, if the film goes any way to going to allowing us to go, everybody deserves to feel safe. Everybody. And that's something we should all aim for, and that's something our society should aim for as well, then yeah, I hope it does that too. Because the character of Danny, who plays Samuel, has a line at the end of the film where he says, you know, to Grace, even you have to feel safe. And I think that's the message of the whole film, that we have to create environments where people can grow and change and heal and feel safe.
And also to feel seen. And
Yeah.
there's that sense of kind of having to feel invisible or not take up too much space. And actually there's space for everyone, and everyone deserves to be seen, and everybody matters.
Yeah, absolutely. And I don't think you can feel safe if you're unseen. Because, you know, because if you're unseen, there's a sense that you can be discarded. So yeah, that's part of it too.
What about having the film here at the London Film Festival?
At the Curzon Soho. I used to go and watch on random Tuesday afternoons on my own indie films in the Curzon Soho. Like when I live in Glasgow now, but I grew up in London, and it was always an escape, and it was this bastion of like indie filmmaking from all over the world. And I can remember many afternoons spent in those, you know, kind of screening rooms. And to have Girl there, I don't know, it kind of blew my mind a little bit. It really did. Because, like, you know, when I was, like, watching those films, I never in a million years thought I would have a film that would be on those screens. So, yeah, it's pretty special. Feels amazing.
And what is it that you think does make this film festival special? Because it does feel like the diversity of filmmakers, of stories, and also, you know, how it just seems to connect with audiences in a way that maybe other film festivals can feel a bit exclusive or a bit separate. There's something so amazing about that.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's really important, not only the types of stories we tell, but how we tell them as well. And sometimes outside of festivals, cinema can feel like it's just one type of story that gets audiences in now, like all the big blockbusters and Marvel things. And it's just really nice to have a festival that's like going, no, 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 cinema has lots of other things as well. And here, come and see those things. And, you know, it's growing an audience as well. There's nothing wrong with blockbusters. I like a good blockbuster, but I also like, my heart is also with, you know, the random story from a different part of the world told in a way that you wouldn't expect, demanding a different way of your attention and a different kind of connection from you. That feels really important.
And obviously having your foot kind of in the theatre world, in the film world, do you feel like you're going to carry on in parallel? Do you have a preference for one, or they just kind of bleed into one in the...
Well, they're very different worlds. They're very different forms of storytelling. I have got the film bug now, but the film is so much slower than theatre. So I think I'll probably, for bread and butter, in order to live, probably I'll have to keep doing both.
Have you got another theatre? You've just done Medea, right? Is that another one coming up? Or
No,
not yet?
No, nothing else coming up. Now it's just writing. I'm trying to start writing my second feature. So yeah, it's kind of like...
Amazing. Thank you so much for sharing all that with me, and really enjoy presenting your film here at the London Film Festival.
Thank you so much for engaging with Girl. Thank you.